What if I told you the Bible and Plato, the book Republic, both convey the same message? And what is this message? My name is Moses, all the way from Toronto, Ontario's capital in Canada. Welcome to Musa Theories. To understand these two books, first I will give you like some sort of a crash course to understand these two books, the Bible and Plato, who he wrote the book Republic. This book was just like a dialogue. But to start everything, let's start with the Bible first, then I will explain Plato's book, The Republic. Then, after explaining the book, we will look at the similarities of the book. After looking at the similarities, we will look at where these two books connect to portray one message. Let's begin. So, the Bible is a book, of course, almost everyone knows what the Bible is. It's a book which is usually, actually not even usually, always the holy book of the Christians and the Abrahamic religions. So I will give a brief summary to the best of my knowledge of what the Bible is. So we'll begin. The Bible starts with the book of Genesis. The Bible is divided into two, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament starts with the book of Genesis, whereby we see the story of creation, Adam and Eve, the story of Garden of Eden, how they sinned against God and how they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. From Genesis, we go to the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus is we see now the life of the Israelites in Egypt and how they were guided by Moses to leave Egypt to go to the promised land. That's the book of Exodus. We are introduced to the first and the most known. He is the figurehead for the Old Testament, Moses. From Exodus, we go to Leviticus. Not really sure the chronological order, but there's Leviticus, which is the relationship of God with the Israelites through priests. Because remember, the tribe of Levi in Israel, in the Jewish tribes, they were the tribe which was given the responsibility of being priests in the society. Then we go to the book of Numbers, whereby we first see the concept of census in the Bible, the concept of people being counted, whereby people are counted to see how many women are there, how many children are there, how many men are there, and also who is going to be enlisted into the army. From there, we go to the book of Deuteronomy. From Deuteronomy, we just see the relationship of God with the Israelites in terms of them following his laws. From the book of Deuteronomy, we go to the book of Joshua. From Joshua actually is the figurehead who takes over from Moses. He's actually the person who leads the people of Israelite into Canaan. Because remember, Moses was punished by God not to enter or step foot into the promised land because he sinned against God. If I remember correctly, he gave wrong instructions to the Israelites regarding getting water. There's a story behind it, but that's a story for another day. So Moses was not allowed to set foot into the promised land. So Joshua took over and took everyone into the promised land. From there, we have other books like the books of Ruth, Esther, there's the book of Judges, there's the book of Kings. And here is even an interesting fact about the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, there are two books which never mention God at all in the whole Bible. That's the book of Songs of Solomon and Esther. The word God is not mentioned anywhere. In the story of Esther is where we see whereby the story of Esther being the queen, whereby he was married to the king and he was able to save the people of Israelite from being executed. Then we can look at the book of Kings, whereby there is the kingship rivalry or the kingship society of Israelite, where we see the first king of Israel, Saul. From Saul, we go to David. Yeah, we go to David, then we go to Solomon. Then the story of David, we see so many other things. We see how David became king after him killing Goliath. Basically, that's the Old Testament in a nutshell, though there are other books whereby they're divided into major prophets, then minor prophets, whereby we see like the major prophet like Elijah, then minor prophets like Habakkuk. Also, in the Old Testament, we see the book of Proverbs, which was written by Solomon. We see the books of Psalms. We see the book of Ecclesiastes. The fun fact about the Old Testament, it's all organized in order from the beginning up to the prophets. Now, let us move to the New Testament. The New Testament is all about the story of Jesus. We look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They are known as the Gospels. Those are the first four books of the New Testament. Remember also a fun fact, the first five books of the Bible are called Torah because they were written by Moses. But now let's focus on the New Testament since that's where we are in. In the New Testament, there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We see the story of Jesus as he is coming to pick up the disciples. He collects all his disciples. Some were fishermen, others were tax collectors. He collects everyone up to the 12th one. In my previous episode, I hinted a bit about the story of Judas, how he betrayed Jesus by a kiss, and I explained it how the astrotheologians look at that story. Please go and look at the first video. As we continue from the first four books, we now go to the Acts of the Apostles. From the Acts of the Apostles, this is where now we start seeing like how the church is developing after Jesus. It also focuses a bit about the crucifixion of Jesus. In the story of crucifixion of Jesus, that's where we will find one of our connections to Plato, the Republic. But hold on, I'm going to tell you the whole story. So from the Acts of Apostles, we go to the letters of Paul. From the letters of Paul, there are almost, not sure, but maybe 13 or 14. A quarter of the New Testament has been written by Paul. We look at the letters of Paul of the Galatians, Thessalonians, Colossians, to name but just a few. After that, now we go to Revelation, whereby we see so much symbolism of the Bible. That's a small crash course of what the Bible is. But we move all the way from Genesis up to the time of Jesus. We see Moses as the biggest figurehead in the Old Testament. Then we see Jesus as the biggest figurehead. Now, the Bible describes God as tripartite: God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Let's hold on to that. Now, let's go to Plato. Plato, he wrote a book called The Republic. It's basically a dialogue between Greek guys. There's Glaucon, Plato, who are talking about exactly what is justice. Basically, they come up with a word called the Kallipolis. What is the Kallipolis? The Kallipolis is basically a good state or the perfect state. An interesting fact is, according to Plato, democracy is the worst system of government. But that's a story also for another day. But now let's focus on what this book, Plato, is. So Plato describes the society whereby a perfect society is whereby everyone knows what they are supposed to do. So he divides the society into three. He once calls the producers people who work. In our society today, I'll call maybe the taxpayers, me and you. Then we go to the guardians. These are people who are supposed to protect, the ones in charge of security of the state. From the security of the state, those people, if they're educated well, they become like the philosopher kings. These are the people who become the rulers of the society. So, according to Plato, if the society is like this, everyone is supposed to be happy because everyone is supposed to stick to what they're supposed to be doing. Also, Plato uses some allegories. Like in the Bible, we see the use of parables For example, Jesus used the parable of the Good Samaritan to explain some of his teachings. I will explain a little bit about the parable of the Good Samaritan. The parable of the Good Samaritan is when there was a person traveling through a place, but he was mugged by thieves and he was left there for dead. He was literally left there naked. So people passed by him and they did not help him. People who are even uh, the same tribe, same religion as him, they passed and they did not help him. But then there was this Samaritan. By those days, the Israelites and the Samaritans had a feud. This guy did not care where this guy came from, but he decided to just help this guy. He took him to like an inn, made sure the guy is well taken care of, and he also paid like some sort of the hotel manager to take care of this guy until he's back to his full health. That's a parable in the Bible. Now, let's go to Plato. Plato uses something called allegories. I'll use the first allegory of the forms, or I'll use the allegory of the metals. The allegory of the metals is whereby he says the society is divided into three metals: gold, silver, and bronze. Gold is the rulers, silver is the people who are taking care of us, like the security. Then bronze is the people who work to maintain the society. He uses one of the biggest, if no one has ever read the book Plato, they've probably come across one of his parables, or as most people in political science like to call it, the allegory of the cave. This is one of Plato's biggest read worldwide pieces. I will briefly talk about the allegory of the cave. So in allegory of the cave, Plato talks about these prisoners who are tied up in a cave. But in that caves, there are some shadows being played to them on the wall. So there's the wall, which has shadows. Then there's the prisoners who are there tied up in chains, watching the shadows. Then behind them, there are people holding the actual objects which are portraying the shadow. Then there's the fire. Then there's the exit of the cave. Now, Plato says one prisoner happens to escape. He gets out, he sees the objects, then he sees the people carrying the objects. After seeing the objects, he sees the fire which is making the objects illuminate into the wall which the prisoners are looking at. After that, the guy looks at the fire, it kind of blinds him a little bit, but he manages to get out of the cave. Once he's out of the cave, he sees the reality of life. He sees how life looks like. He now sees a different perspective of life. He decides, you know what, I'm going to get out and go tell the other prisoners, like, hey, the life here is not what you really think. We really need to get out of this cave. When he goes back to the cave, he faces challenges. The people don't want to listen to him. The people really do not want to engage with him. They really kick him out. But the essence of the allegory of the cave is to get him out. But with this allegory of the cave, I am sure most people have watched the movie The Matrix, whereby we see Neo meeting Morpheus. Actually, the whole movie Matrix is a whole concept of Plato's Republic, which is the allegory of the cave. How is this? Look at the movie Matrix, we see Neo. Neo is kind of like in a dream world, or in a world which is not a reality, but he wants to escape from it. He meets Morpheus. Morpheus asks him about either the red pill or the blue pill. Write down in the comments if you remember which pill Neo took. But to relate this now to the Bible, we look at a story of Jesus whereby he is about to be crucified. At the time of Jesus, there's a man called Caiaphas. Caiaphas is one of the priests. Actually, he's the high priest at that time in Israel. He is the one who handles all the Israelite affairs. But remember, at this time, the Israelites were under the Romans. So Caiaphas goes to Pontius Pilate, who was like the Roman prefect of the Israelites at that time. He convinces Pontius Pilate to arrest Jesus. But to Pontius Pilate, he's like, you know what? I do not see if this is a good idea. But because for political reasons, Pontius Pilate agrees to this request by Caiaphas. But Pontius Pilate has another sleeve and has another trick to his slave. He says, you know what? He says, call all the Israelite people. I have a prisoner I would like to exchange. Would you like me to arrest Jesus, but in exchange for Barnabas, or I keep Barnabas in prison and you keep Jesus? In context, Barnabas was like the biggest criminal at that time. People decided, you know what? Release Barnabas, arrest Jesus. So basically, come to relate it to Plato, we look at it like the blue pill and the red pill. In our society, we will always be given two choices. Which one do you want? But also look at the movie, the Ghost Rider, which is also the theory from the Plato's Republic, comes whereby the Ghost Rider was only illuminating one kind of flame, the red one. But when you reach at the end of the movie, he's able to tap into another power of his whereby he was removing the angelic side, meaning there's always two sides to a story. That's why it's called Mosa theories. Now let us look at some of the similarities between the Bible and Plato's Republic. One of the similarities we look at here is the use of parables. Some of the parables, let's say look at one of the parable, which is the parable of the prodigal son, whereby this son, who is a son of a rich person, goes to his father, tells his father, I just want to leave and go. Give me my share of my inheritance, and I want to go and live. The father agrees, he's given his inheritance. From his inheritance, he goes, spend it badly, comes back home, but his father welcomes him home with open arms. Although his brother is not happy, but his father tells the brother, is like, oh, your brother was misled and everything, but we are happy he's back home. Plato uses parables too in his book to portray the same kind of message, whereby if we look at the parable or the allegory of the cave, we look at the prisoner who escapes but still comes back to try and get people out. So here is the connection and here is the message these two books are trying to portray. The message here is there are always chances, there's always something for you to pick. There are always two sides of the story. We all have this different perspective. Another similarity we can look at is the journey of enlightenment. Both books talk about the journey of enlightenment. We look at the story of Jesus when he's crucified. On the third day, he wakes up, he rose again, and he rejoins with the Father. The same way with the allegory, the person gets out of the cave, he goes to the sun. Basically, the thing is to know the best forms of ourselves. Another similarity, or even if you look at it, another connection too, is the use of philosopher kings. According to Plato, the perfect society is ruled by philosopher kings. If you look at the story of the Bible from Genesis up to Revelation, we see the movement, how the Israelite society evolves. First of all, they are ruled by just prophets who just prophesy things. Then it comes to kings. They're also ruled by judges. Actually, most people don't know one of the judges we look at. I'll give you an example of one of the judges is Samson. Everyone knows the story of Samson. Actually, there's even a funny theory about this story. The story of Samson is whereby the Israelites are at war with an enemy, but they have a problem. The enemy has a problem of getting Samson down because everyone knew Samson was the strongest man alive at that point. But as we all know, Samson meets Delilah, blah, blah, blah. Things happen. Samson is subdued. He's arrested. and his eyes are removed, and they shave his hair, since his strength comes from his hair. But while in prison, his hair grows back. So at one point, the king of the enemy says, "You know what? Bring Samson here. We want to show off like how we can subdue our enemy." So they put Samson in between two pillars. So at that point, Samson decides, "You know what? I need to pray." And he asked God for last power to destroy his enemy. So Samson pushes all the pillars away and destroys everyone with him, giving birth to the Samson theory, or most Christians like to call it the Samson option, whereby if you have been subdued with the enemy, you take out yourself plus the enemy, commonly known as the Samson option or the Samson theory. As we go on, as I try to conclude, is these two books connect in a point whereby all of them, they just want you to be the best form of yourself. When you look at the Bible from the beginning to the end, we see how human being evolves. That means these two books all advocate for change. There's nothing, everything in this world, nothing is permanent. The only permanent thing in this earth is change. Life will always change. Society always change. One thing also, these two books also talk about is you know yourself, know thyself. Because if you look at the organization of the Israelites back then, every tribe had a career. Like the tribe of Levi they were the one like supposed to be priests. If you look at Plato, he says we should all stick to what we do best. Like the Israelites, the best tribe to be priests was the tribe of Levi. To Plato, the society should be divided into what we do best. And how do you know what you do best? The only way to know what you do best is to know yourself. And from that, my name is Moses, and thank you for watching Mosa Theories.